Kristen Atchison here, and we're talking about Chapter 16, Families in Society. This is our second lecture where we're talking about the different ways that families can look, the different kinds of families that we can have. So divorce is one way that can change the family structure. Between 1960 and 1985, the divorce rate rose dramatically. In fact, the U.S. has the highest divorce rate in the world. And you can see here, this is compared to other industrialized nations. And we see that about 45% of marriages end in divorce. Again, that divorce rate rose really rapidly between 1960 and 1985. And a lot of that has to do with the changing role of women and the increasing accessibility of them in the to positions in the workforce, which gave financial means, which allowed for situations of divorce. There was also changing kind of mores in terms of society and what was acceptable. And so that's really where we saw that increase. It really leveled off, though, at about 50% and then fell a little bit. So we're kind of at about 45% of marriages end in divorce now. About half of these have children. So that's going to change a family structure in terms of what a family is going to look like. It's going to create opportunity situations where there's children living with just one parent and then with another parent another time. It can create situations for blended families. All of these create situations where we can have families look different ways. We see that the immediate effects of divorce in terms of children is there's instability and conflict. There's a drop in income, which is one of the major negative effects of divorce. We see that the majority of families of divorce are below the poverty line. There's also increased parental stress and disorganization, who gets who when and who's in charge of what. And these consequences can really be influenced and affected by the age and the temperament and the gender of the child. And so different ages are going to feel these things differently because of their different developmental capabilities. Different temperament. So if we're dealing with an easy child, they're going to be more adaptable to this new situation than if we're dealing with a difficult child or a slow to warm up child who's not going to be as adaptable to change. So we'll see that the consequences of divorce, again, will be mediated by the individual themselves. In terms of long-term, we see most individuals really have improved adjustment after 2 years. So there is a period of instability. There's a period typically where the family's trying to figure things out. How do things work? How does this new family structure work for us? But after 2 years, usually that's kind of stabilized. And so we see improved adjustment after that. Boys and children with difficult temperaments are more likely to have problems, again, because children with difficult temperaments aren't going to be as adaptable to change. That's going to be a cause of problem. Sometimes boys will have more problems as a function of kind of the gender acceptability of expressing emotions. This is a highly emotional situation for the child as well. And if they're not given the tools to really express those emotions, we can see that that's going to kind of create an unhealthy situation for that individual. So again, the boys is going to be more of a function of some of those gender roles. So if it's a child who is allowed to and has been taught to express their emotions in healthy ways, we're not going to see those more difficult situations. Both parents' involvement really affects the adjustment. So if children are with mom, in the majority of divorced families, that's what happens. And in fact, a lot of states, that kind of is the default. You have to make a really good case for why dad should have custody. It's very, very difficult. And so typically we'll see that the children primary residence is with the mother. We see them having that other parent's involvement is still very, very important. So we see the best outcomes for situations where there are split living situations, but we continue to maintain that involvement. When we talked about parenting style, we talked about how warmth and acceptance and involvement are really, really important and really, really good protective factors. So if you take that away from 50% of it from, by taking one parent away, we'll really see some negative outcomes. So again, we do see the best outcomes when both parents really continue to maintain contact and maintain involvement. Helping families through divorce, it's important to really shield children from the conflict within that marital relationship. That fight between husband and wife or between that marital couple is not the child's fight. And so, again, shielding them from that conflict is very, very important. Also, providing continuity. So much is changing where there are opportunities to keep things the same. Those should be tried to be kept the same. Also talking about it, explaining it, explaining what divorce is, what it means, explaining the permanence of this situation, but also stressing that it's not going to change necessarily the relationships with the children, that it doesn't affect the warmth that parent feels to the child, that that's still maintained. Again, we'll see the best outcomes when that involvement is maintained with both parents. So telling the child that and then following it up are opportunities to provide continuity. Also sympathize with the child's feelings. So no matter how the parent is feeling about this situation, really being able to sympathize with how the child is feeling and how the child's feelings are going to be different than the parent's feelings, and being able to separate those. So, that just because the child is upset, that needs to be honored too, and that those are valid feelings, in addition to the feelings that the parent themselves is having. Really continuing to use that authoritative parenting, that high warmth and high control, maintaining those things are really, really important. Again, promoting those relationships with both parental figures, really maintaining those relationships. Again, we're going to see the best adjustment. We're going to see the best, that's going to provide opportunities for continuity as well. And we'll see the best outcomes when those relationships are maintained. So with this, we can have opportunities, again, for blended families. One example of a blended family would be step parenting. And so that's when we've had a divorce, we've had a remarriage, and so there's a parent that's now living in the home with the child, or that may not be, but there's another adult on the scene who is a step parent. We typically do see higher levels of tension and disagreement. And some of this is really unfortunately funneled at stepmothers. They're most likely to experience conflict. Some of that is kind of the view of the stepmother, and so we see tends to be more conflict. Some of that has to do with the fact that in our culture, the primary caregiver is seen as the female, and so kind of stepping into that gender role whilst being a step parent is difficult. Kind of the expectations, and yet not the expectations. And so we see increased tension, we see more disagreement. Navigating that is difficult. We actually see higher divorce rates within these blended remarried families, higher divorce rates than even our 45%. Some of this has to do with maybe the nature of the relationship and the nature of the individuals in the relationship, but some of it has to do with the higher levels of tension that having stepchildren can create. So we do see higher divorce rates there. Mother, stepfather is the most frequent blended family type. Boys typically adjust really pretty quickly to this. Girls adapt less favorably. They don't do as well with it as boys do. And older children and adolescents of both sexes typically display more problems. They've had more continuity before that. They've had kind of a set way of the way things were, and now they're not. And so they don't typically adjust as easily, regardless of their gender, than younger children do. Father stepmother is less frequent, but this typically also leads to reduced father-child contact. So again, the child is typically with their biological or their, adoptive whatever parent, that mother, and so the father is living someplace separately. When the father remarries and has that stepmother situation, whether there's children that are brought into this new relationship, or there's children that are born into this new relationship, or just kind of that addition of kind of having a new family unit, typically leads to reduction in the amount of father-child contact. We know that's not good, right? We know maintaining that relationship is very, very important. And so that can be a negative. Children in father's custody often react really negatively to this. Again, the stepmothers are unfortunately getting a lot of the conflict, especially when children who are living with fathers, a stepmother comes in. And again, some of that is that gender role, kind of what's expected of that gender role, either implicitly or explicitly, kind of butting up against the fact that that may not be the role that the stepmother wants to be in, or the child wants the stepmother to be in, or the spouse wants the stepmother to be in. Girls and stepmothers typically are slow to get along at first, but typically through time, again, we'll see better adjustment as time goes on. We see the worst outcomes really immediately, just because it is that time period of upheaval, of that time period of great change. And so we're going to see the most negative consequences really right after the divorce, or while that divorce proceedings, that process is going on. We see that there's a lot more anxiety and depression in children. We see a lot more parent-child conflict again, immediately after the divorce. We see that children of divorce tend to be at a higher risk for some antisocial behaviors, lower self-esteem, school difficulties, and poor peer relations. Age and gender are huge mediating factors here. So kind of the age at which the divorce is happening, we're going to see, again, worse outcomes in adolescence than we will see in really early childhood. Gender will play a role again. We talked about boys versus girls and how they're adapting these things. But again, the biggest really factor is that maintaining that parental involvement. So again, all those things that we talked about, lessening the effects, to transition a family through divorce will all reduce the risk of these kinds of things. Now, this is in no way saying a child of divorce, these things are going to happen to that child. What this is saying is, statistically speaking, there's a greater chance that they may exhibit these behaviors as opposed to a child who's not a child of divorce. So it is no way saying that the divorce is the cause. So we're talking about at risk. So we're talking about a correlation. And so remember, that's not cause and effect. So here we're just saying that this is a factor in here. We also know that gender is a factor. We also know that age is a factor. We also know that blended families are a factor. We also know that maintaining that parental involvement is a factor. But that divorce is a factor that that does have some predictive value for that. But again, this is in no way saying all children of divorce these things happen to, because that would be completely false. Changes in parenting style really can affect the children's adjustment as well. So we talk about these parenting styles. A parent may be exhibiting a certain parenting style in this marital relationship, kind of whether they're getting modeling from one versus the other, or just how those parents interact together. And when that relationship breaks up, we can see changes in parenting style because there isn't that influence of that other partner as much. And that can really affect a child's adjustment. It can go positive if that parenting style becomes more authoritative. That would be good. However, it can go negative too. If the parent all of a sudden becomes permissive and is really kind of granting all of the things that the child wants, that can affect that child's adjustment. The quality of time spent with that non-custodial parent really affects the outcome as well. So again, it's about maintaining that relationship with that non-custodial parent. And so that's not about, just like spending time together, watching the TV and zoning out. This is about actually the quality of the time. It's not quantity, it's the quality of the time where that relationship is maintained, that attachment that child has to that parent and that parent has to that child is really maintained and taken care of. That relationship is taken care of. Blended families through a marriage, again, there's a typical adjustment period, particularly with adolescents, but we do see good outcomes. The relationship between newly married couple also reflects the child's adjustment. So this new relationship can also, affect the child as well. Just because, again, we talk about families as this complex system. And so it was complex before, and we've added more people to it. So every time you add another player, it gets more complex. So this new relationship can play a role as well in the child's adjustment. So if this is a really beneficial relationship for this parent and this parent is a lot happier, that's good for the kid, right? Maintaining that relationship and having that positive kind of affect because of this good relationship will be good for the child. So this can go both ways. It can go negative or positively depending on what the situation is. Families are not always two-parent families. We also have single parents. One of the ways that we do this, the most common way, is never married single parents. And this is really about 10% of U.S. children have parents that are single parents who were never married to their other biological parent. In this situation, we see mostly that these individuals rely on their extended family for additional support. Parenting is a lot of work, and it's easier if you can spread it among more people. And so if you are in a single parent situation, having more people you can spread it out on is very, very helpful. Again, children lacking that second parent's involvement really fare much more poorly. Again, there's only so much time and so much energy that a parent can really be there for a child. And so having more hands and more energy is beneficial. This is not saying that a child that didn't have a father's involvement is going to have huge negative consequences. This is saying that as compared to children who have a two-parent household and who have, not a two-parent household, but have access to both parents, we're going to see better. Just because you're getting more, it's the better the input, the better the output. Again, those roles can be filled by other family members, and you can maintain good levels of, input and care and all sorts of these things through extended family. But that father involvement is very, very important. Both parents are very, very important. Children in single parent families tend to have poor outcomes. Again, a lot of that has to do with socioeconomic status. Because we talked about just divorce making you below the poverty line, it's even worse in single parent, never married single parents. We see that, so that's a contributing factor. Again, the amount of resources that's available in terms of time is a lot less in never married single parents. And we see that parents that became parents as an adolescent really have the most difficulty because the issues that the never married single parents have are really compounded when we're dealing with an adolescent because we're dealing with low educational backgrounds. If you're having a child at 16, it's going to be very, very hard to continue your education. It's not doable. There's lots of people that have done that and have succeeded really well at that. It's just a lot more work. And so we typically see never married single parents have lower educational backgrounds. We also tend to see, because again, we talked about that, even the divorced families having a large proportion below the poverty line, we're going to see that adolescent parents really are going to be more likely to be low socioeconomic, really have those impoverished neighborhoods. Again, that's not going to provide a ton of extra resources for that child to be supportive of this situation that really needs some extra support. So we talked about never married single parents. There is a difference, however, though, with single mothers by choice. So a never married single parent by choice or single mother by choice. And now with, adoptions and different kinds of reproductive things, we can have fathers as well. But these single mothers by choice do not appear to be at risk like other single parent families. And so this is like a planned single parent pregnancy is what this is. Again, these individuals tend, because planning went into that, we tend to have, and to be able to do that in most ways requires some medical attention. And so there's more socioeconomic resources available in that situation. So we do not see these same level of risks for children of single mothers by choice. Families also look different now than they used to as well. So even in a two-parent male-female relationship, we see these relationships look different. We see maternal employment being, again, increasing. We see dual earner households being increasingly prevalent as well. The benefits of this include these children have higher self-esteem. They have really positive family and peer relationships, and they have fewer gender stereotypes. If mom is working and dad is working, then you're not going to say, oh, dad's the one that works, mom's the one that comes home and takes care of the baby. Because to be able to make that work, typically dad has to help out with the childcare. Dad has to help out around the house. Dad has to help out with food. And because mom is also out working as well. And so you'll see less gender stereotypes. Again, because of these, and also it allows for some opportunities for increased self-sufficiency, which can, again, help higher self-esteem. We'll see better grades in these individuals as well. And again, we're going to see a lot more father involvement. Just within my own life, the difference between when I teach one class versus two classes versus three classes versus four classes, the amount of involvement that my husband does in our everyday life and with taking care of my daughter and with taking care of the house really increases. Basically, when I'm not here as much to do a lot of those things, then he needs to do a lot more as well. We have to split those tasks more. So we'll see more father involvement in these dual earner households, in these situations with maternal employment. Now, maternal employment does not equal dual earner households. We are seeing an increasing trend of stay-at-home dads, which is also great. Again, we'll see benefits for that as well, just as there are some benefits for stay-at-home moms. But these are the benefits for kind of the dual earner situations. In the stay-at-home dad situation, we still will see those fewer gender stereotypes as well, because they're really kind of smashing them as they stand now. The drawbacks, there's less time for the kids. So you have less time because you're spending more time at work. And so that can happen. Because you have less time, there's a greater risk for ineffective parenting. Effective parenting is a lot of work, and it's not something that one can do 100% all the time. But when you add on the additional stress of employment, that can really kind of drain that energy pool to really engage in this effective parenting. We see support for working families. We talked about support being a really big factor. We see support for working families being a really big factor in terms of good outcomes as well. This can include things such as flexible schedules and job sharing. So my schedule is flexible and I am able to work around it, and the university works with me so that I can make my schedule work with my daughter's school schedule. And so this works so that I'm here for her when she gets off the bus. But I've been working with you guys, and working on lectures and talking and emailing with you guys all day before she gets home from school. Having adequate sick leave is really, really important, because it's not the parent necessarily that's getting sick, the kid gets sick. And so having that enough sick leave that parents can really be there for both when they get sick or when their children get sick. Again, that involvement of the other parent is really, really important. Having that egalitarian relationship where it's more equal, we'll see is going to be very, very beneficial for the child in terms of a number of different things. Equal pay and opportunities. Um, there's still not equal pay for women. And so that can cause some financial discrepancies in the situation. Having opportunities for quality childcare, we'll see that employers who provide on-site quality childcare really have huge amounts of worker productivity. They have huge amounts of worker satisfaction because these parents know that their kids are being taken care of. Parents can go in and see their kid at lunch or on break. And that's really beneficial for both the child and the parent, which then plays off and ends up being beneficial for the company because that employee is happier. Families can also look different because of adoption. So we typically see within the United States that adopted families are more likely, the adoptive parents are more likely to be European American or Caucasian. And that's just typically within the United States. Obviously, in different cultures and different countries, that would be different. The older the child is at adoption, though, the greater the risk there is of behavioral problems. But some of this is due to what kind of situation the child was living in previously. Was the child, skipping around in the foster system? Was the child in a neglectful situation? And so again, we will see differences depending on the age of the child. Foster care. You are to read an article this week about a foster child talking about her foster parent, and she talks about how, or the child talks about how they've gone through multiple moves, and how they hadn't previously really had attachments, and how she was able to form an attachment with this caregiver. So we'll see that this kind of bouncing around the foster system can be very difficult. Even when the child is going back to their parent, sometimes there's not a lot of notice for the child, the foster parents, or even the biological parents in this situation. I know of a situation where a woman was fostering a child and she got, I think, 2 hours notice that the child was being picked up. This was traumatic for both the child who had been with her for an extended period of time and the foster parent. And so again, this system is needing help and is needing work. That being said, there's a lot of people doing a lot of great work out there in this system to really help these children and these families. Families also look different because of differences in sexual orientation. Gay and lesbian parents, this can happen through a number of different ways. It can happen through having a previous heterosexual partner, and so then this would be a blended relationship. It can happen through adoption. It can happen through assisted reproduction. That could be something such as in vitro fertilization. This could be IUI. This could be egg donating and surrogacy. This could be a number of different ways. Children are really very, very similar to their peers in terms of cognitive measures. We do not see differences in children of gay and lesbian parents as we do in children of heterosexual parents. That's just not something that we see. In fact, because these families are families of choice, there's a lot more effort usually required in adoption or assisted reproduction to create that family. And so a lot of times we'll actually see this really being a beneficial situation because it is a family of choice. This wasn't, you accidentally had assisted reproduction. This was a plan, and we formulated a plan for this. So there's no evidence to support negative outcomes for children with gay or lesbian parents. Absolutely no evidence of this. There is no evidence to support differences in gender role development, sexual identity, or sexual orientation of those children. So we don't see any differences between these gender roles, sexual identity, gender identity, sexual orientation, any of these. We don't see any difference between children brought up by heterosexual parents and children brought up by gay and lesbian parents. And again, there's no evidence to support differences in sexual orientation. So we see the gay and lesbian parents, everything that we've talked about in terms of parenting, in terms of the different kinds of parenting and the benefits, and all of that is just the same as it is for a parent of a heterosexual couple. So, this ends our conversation about parents and the different kinds of families that we can have. And this ends our course for developmental psychology. So, thanks.